I find a lot of companies are actually losing value because of the wrong organization. They have a really weird hierarchy of decision making that's really slowing down the process of making decisions, implementing strategy, even developing the right strategy, having the right people to implement it, and having the right people available or able to innovate. That's part of using sustainability as a revenue driver is innovation. And that is a loss if people are kind of stuck in these traditional models and not thinking outside the box, not encouraging a culture of failure, quite frankly. That's going to stagnate your growth, your innovation, your ability to generate new service lines, new products, improve on existing products. Just explore.
Melanie, thank you for joining us. We're super excited to have you today. As we do with all of our guests, we'd love to get started with getting a better understanding of what you're passionate about, whether it's personal or professional or both.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for the invite. I think passionate is one of the typical adjectives used to describe me in general. Sustainability as a whole has been a passion of mine now for 25 plus years. It did not necessarily start out as a passion. It started out as something I was doing so I could study abroad in school, and I had to pick a major. And so I made up my own major because it didn't exist then. And it's become a passion, obviously. I've been doing it for 25 years. And I think the part of it that I really enjoy is that it's about a system. It's about systems, a system, systems working together. It touches kind of everything and everyone in the world. I can constantly learn, constantly talk to all kinds of people about energy, about technology, about, the environment and so many different kinds of environments. Talk about people, different cultures and the future. And I'm very much passionate about how do we prepare ourselves and our businesses for the future. So for me, like sustainability is very much an all-encompassing thing for passion.
Yeah, so good. Where do you think that passion comes from, Melanie? Is there like a catalytic moment or an upbringing, or what drives that?
So I think a couple of things. As a kid, I was the nerdy, geeky kid that was really into puzzles, probably to an unhealthy point. Like I would just sit and do them for hours. I would do the same ones enough that I started doing them face down. Like I just really like to connect the pieces. And so I think that's where the kind of system, seeing the picture and how all the pieces fit together comes into play for sustainability and specifically for strategy. It's like we know what is missing or wrong. And so now how do we fix it? What's the pathway to get there? I'm like a tinkerer, experimenter, chemist by nature. And so I think that kind of desire to tinker and fix and kind of experiment and see what impacts what is part of that systems thinking, which is so key for sustainability. But specifically for more of the development and beyond I was really into geology and that kind of stuff, chemistry as a kid. But what shifted was a class I took at UC Berkeley, this phenomenal professor named Claudia Carr, Dr. Claudia Carr, and she changed my life 100%. Again, took the class just to study abroad. I needed to pick a major, could not figure out what I wanted to do. And she was talking about concepts and connections between my purchasing habits or just my living here in the US and how that would be impacting someone in sub-Saharan Africa. I got really into agricultural research. I did a lot of research on, for example, small-scale farming in Kenya or in the Amazon and Belize. I don't know why that became my thing, but I really enjoyed learning about systems, agricultural systems, food systems, and how I impact those with my choices here. And kind of being a person that hadn't considered myself as having a negative impact in that way, it was really eye-opening. And I think that's the thing that continues to drive me now is how do I improve my impact? How do I make a more positive legacy for me and whatever company I'm working for or with?
Yeah. you had a pretty tremendous career. Kind of give us the highlight reel. What has brought you to where you are today?
So I did not have a straight line path to where I am now at all. I've worked in a myriad of industries. I've worked in travel, I've worked in retail and hospitality, and I've always come back though to sustainability, whether that's, community gardens, agriculture, farming, working in nonprofits. I even worked for an eco terrain, which is an environmental publication out of Berkeley. I've worked in radio. I've done music, like so many things across the board. But sustainability is kind of the constant that I have, along with art and wellness and that kind of thing. But I've worked with some of the largest companies in the world. I worked with Accenture. I was a sustainability director there, and worked with clients from Fortune 10 all the way to startups and nonprofits across industries in healthcare, manufacturing. I worked with automotive clients. I worked in consulting and manufacturing. I've worked in supply chain. I've worked on the technology implementation side, like really across the gamut. And I have a weird knack for the compliance side. I am the person that will read the standard. I will read the decision from the court or whatever governing body. And I've really been able to create a space for myself in that over my career. And kind of, I think it's a differentiator for me, is the regulatory importance that we have now for sustainability. And then also kind of the crossover of academic work, business, regulatory space, nonprofit world, all of those things kind of coming together in these roles. Before I stepped into fully my own company in March, I was leading sustainability at LinkedIn, and that was great. But so much of my work started to be compliance reporting, and honestly, not being able to do what I was hired to do, which was to take them to the next level of sustainability and move it from being just a compliance function to a revenue driver. That is what, like, I am so focused on doing that. And I felt like I didn't have the right ability to do that there in the way that it needed to be done. And I realized I can just kind of standardize what I was doing there and do it for other companies. And so that's what I'm doing now. And also leadership development, helping people more on the leadership side. So career, mindset, performance in work, but also personal life, health and wellness, and bringing all of those together.
Too often, I think people see sustainability as a compliance bit, and got to check the box, or we've got to submit our GRESB reports or our whatever reporting body it is. Talk a little bit about the other side of that, which is, okay, compliance, you got to do this, but what are the revenue generating opportunities?
Hmm. Well, I think what you're working on at VECKTA is a really good example of, there's one side, which is the revenue generation, and also the kind of just being more efficient, cutting costs, unlocking trapped value. That's something that I talk about a lot. And sometimes that's revenue, sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's risk. But purely revenue generation depends on the business. I noticed that with quite a lot of services, they're missing out on just using sustainability as a service, something they can do for their clients, whether it be energy generation, whether it be helping them to be more efficient with even decision making. Embedding sustainability into decision making necessarily means that you're using resources as efficiently as you can. It means that you are teaming properly. I find a lot of companies are actually losing value because of the wrong organization. They have a really weird hierarchy of decision making that's really slowing down the process of making decisions, implementing strategy, even developing the right strategy, having the right people to implement it, and having the right people available or able to innovate. That's part of using sustainability as a revenue driver, is innovation. And that is a loss if people are kind of stuck in these traditional models and not thinking outside the box, not encouraging a culture of failure, quite frankly. That's going to stagnate your growth, your innovation, your ability to generate new service lines, new products. improve on existing products. Just explore. And I think that's part of what's needed. But also how capital is being managed in an organization. That is one thing that I am very good at identifying, is having money placed in the right places to do what you need it to do. I see quite often sustainability programs are spending sometimes tens of millions of dollars on carbon offsets. And that is 99% of their sustainability budget is just to purchase offsets, where they could be taking a large portion of that, or even all of it, just even a large percentage, and put that into the operational side, put that into their team, put that into innovation, and they would actually get a return on that instead of just sinking money into something that's not really helping you. It's just something after the fact, or certification, great for your carbon neutral goal or carbon net zero target, but it doesn't really have a functional operational ROI in most cases. I'm curious, what are you seeing in your work at VECKTA with your clients? Where are you seeing the revenue?
I mean, I agree with some of your opening statements around, we use the term trapped value as well. And I think in our world, it's really around operational cost overspend. So we're seeing this kind of new energy era that we've entered into over the last couple of years, where businesses have historically relied solely on the utility grid, and with companies with large real estate portfolios that could be dozens, or in some cases hundreds of utilities, and yet those costs continue to creep up. And those that are chasing after sustainability goals get essentially double charged or double hit. They're paying more for their utility energy costs that is not necessarily sustainable. It has a ton of carbon emissions, and then they're paying to offset that with renewable energy certificates or carbon offsets. And so you've got this kind of double payment happening, whereas you do have the ability to take matters into your own hand, deploy your own energy systems, create that operational efficiencies, and do something in your business that's not just a marketing tactic or a sunk cost that's not actually changing your business, but a Band-Aid over an issue that you could actually start to address yourself.
And Melanie, we were at one of the leading sustainability conferences last week, and it felt like we'd gone back in time 5 or 10 years. It was almost like the same conversation being had as we're struggling to collect data. We need to be reporting data, and no one was actually talking about how do you turn data into action and impact and better stakeholder engagement, better customer retention, better employee retention, cheaper capital, lower insurance prices, all these amazing things that you can get out of doing the right thing and driving business value. What is the barrier between taking that action and being stuck in that reporting and compliance role based on what you've seen in industry?
A few things I will say. I think partly it's who holds the budget, because that's who ultimately decides how capital is being invested, what's being prioritized. And quite often that's not going to be sustainability, even for companies that, say they're sustainable. They have really amazing reports. They have great PR and marketing. But if you look at their investments, if you look at what they are funding internally, that may or may not be the case. And quite often, the people who are managing or responsible for, accountable for those sustainability initiatives or programs are not the ones who are making the decisions about the budget. Even the CSO is hardly ever reporting directly to the CEO. So usually they're 2 or 3 steps down from that. Sometimes a sustainability director might be 5 or 6 steps down from the CEO. And you might be able to decide for a small amount of funding, but if it's over 100K or 200K, you're going to have to get buy-in from leadership. And it slows things down. It makes it harder. There's more justification needed. And it just makes the process more cumbersome. And quite often, the people that are making those decisions are not educated about sustainability or the why. And so there's a process that has to be done to walk them through, why is this important? Why does this matter? why do I care beyond having a cool recycling program or something? You know what I mean? It's like you have to kind of meet them at where they are, but bring them on the journey, bring them to where you want to go. I think honestly, that's been my biggest barrier is leadership buy-in, but that's, I think, also been my greatest success. And why I've had such a long career in this field is because I have found that with many sustainability leaders, there's a desire to speak to the moral compass, to speak to it's the right thing to do, to speak to climate goals, carbon emissions. And that is great. I love that. I believe in that. My heart is there. However, I recognize that most CFOs are not, that's not their motivation. That's not what they get paid to do. That's not why they're there. It's also not why most businesses are there. So I have to meet people where they are, speak the language that they understand, bring things in terms of ROI or in terms of cost, revenue, in terms of profitability, lower risk, things like that. And really also, I have to do soul searching of, am I actually delivering value to the organization? And if so, how? Reducing carbon emissions is not necessarily delivering value to an organization, especially if I'm doing that mostly through offsets. So what am I actually doing that's creating value that the organization considers valuable, not me as a practitioner or a leader? And I think when you overcome that, that unlocks so much. It unlocks relationships and engagement and interest and funding and all of those things in a way that I have not seen other approaches be successful in the same way as that. And I've worked in some non-friendly to sustainability environments and still had really a lot of success in getting the things done that I want to get done.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous. I'd love to hear if you have any tangible advice for those listeners that are in that kind of world. Maybe they're disconnected from the CEO. I think one of the things that you talk about is the similarities between a CSO or sustainability leader and the CEO because of the need to work across all of the different stakeholders within an organization. What are some pieces of tangible advice that you could give to someone that's in that role in helping them really affect change within their organization and drive that change, and doing so knowing that they're coming at it from a place of wanting to do good, but understanding the system in which they're working within, how they can make that change happen?
I love that question. That's a good one. Not that the others weren't good, but I think this one's particularly fascinating. And maybe a story I think would help is one of my first roles. I was working for a large consulting firm. We were launching a new program for North America that I was leading for sustainability and community engagement. And the team previously had tried, I think, 3 times to get funding for ISO 14001 certification. That would sort of be the actual launch of this program. And it kept getting denied. They couldn't get it funded. And I couldn't figure out why at first. And then I finally saw the deck that they had been using. And I said, oh, no wonder. And I brought it to the CSR lead. And she said, do you really think that this is going to speak to our finance VP or SVP of finance, basically the CFO? And I said, probably not. There was no mention of kind of money and the financial ROI. It was very heavy on emissions, and we can reduce our emissions and our carbon footprint, and it's environmental stewardship, and our clients are kind of doing this, but there was not a clear, this is the ROI, this is the kind of financial benefit or other benefit directly to the company. It was really depending on it's the great thing to do, which again, I love that. Not going to speak to everyone. And once we revamped things, we gave a clear ROI. I think, got 20 minutes into the conversation. He's like, that's all you need? Great, let's do this. Because it was really clear and it was a simple decision because he could understand it. It made sense. Yeah, of course, let's do that. Why wouldn't we do that? So it changed from an absolutely not to why would we not do that? And so I think it's, again, speaking the language of your audience, of your stakeholders, finding who the decision makers are and who the gatekeepers are, networking across the organization. I've been in so many different organizations, and one of the main pieces of feedback I get is that people are amazed by how fast I am able to learn so much about an organization that people could not learn in 10 years there. And it's because I talk to people. I talk to the people that are interns. I talk to the entry level people. I talk to the the maintenance staff. I talk to the CEOs or C-suite or whoever I can get a meeting with. I talk to my peers. I talk to people in my role in other industries and companies. And it gives you information and it builds a network and it builds relationship. And to me, that's one of the most important things of being in this work is relationship building, and not doing it to get something out of someone, but really just to come with an inquisitive mind, an open mind, to learn, to just engage with people, not because I'm trying to I don't know, prove my case or get something funded. It's more, I want to learn about this. Let's talk about this. Let's work together. Let's co-create.
I love your concept of uncomfortable transparency. Do you want to dig in on that and share a little bit about how, just cherry picking your metrics, it can lead to good reporting, but not necessarily good outcomes? And how do you have those tough conversations across the organization to drive true impact?
I think this is where we are today. And not a lot of organizations are having that level of transparency, frankly. I am encouraged though, because I feel like the ones who are now being seen as leaders, where when I started in this field, the companies that led were just disclosing, not necessarily being actually transparent, not actually sharing what needed to be shared. It was like a very intentional scope to present the company in a certain light. And I think part of that is because companies, especially publicly traded ones, have to tread carefully about how they're perceived, how the public perceives the statements that they're making, how their board perceives these statements. Can they stand behind them? Do they have to walk back on a commitment that they made? Or can they just kind of change the scope slightly so that the commitment technically still stands, but the frame and scope is different? No, we're not going to be carbon negative in everything, just in this one area or these couple categories of scope 3 emissions. Or yes, we're going to be carbon net zero, and reduce as much as we can, but we are going to still offset the rest just like we would if it was carbon neutral. And so sometimes it's methodology also, and just I don't think it's a manipulation necessarily. Sometimes those issues with transparency and data are just limitations of our methodologies of calculations right now. Scope 3 being a prime example, there are different emissions factors you can use based on where you are, Europe versus the US versus Australia. That's going to change things. You're not comparing apples to apples, and how you standardize that across a global organization can be tough. Sometimes you don't have all the data. With scope 3, most people are starting out with spend-based data, which means that it's about how much you're spending, the invoices that you have. So that's really what you're working with. It doesn't mean that something that is more sustainable gets credit for it either. And so how do you maintain your goal, your scope 3 goal, when it's all about spend, so that if you were to actually do something that reduced scope 3 emissions, but it costs more, your emissions will still go up because of the methodology. So I think some of it is people trying to balance just limitations with calculation methodology. Sometimes it's PR and trying to work within certain regulatory spaces without having to change too much. But I feel like that's happening less and less because people, consumers, the public know more and more. People are more educated. Leaders are more educated about what to do and how to do it. So I think we're shifting, but it's still quite a thing.
Yeah. Within the space, it feels like over the last, 6, 12, 18 plus months, there's been a bit of a pullback with some organizations on sustainability or ESG. How do you see that playing out in the coming years? And one of the things I know you talk about is kind of maybe shifting the conversation around sustainability to be the whole system and not just carbon emissions or waste or water. What do you see the kind of maybe the definition, but also the role of sustainability within large organizations over the coming 5-10 years?
So I think this has been the question of the day for the last, 7 or 8 months, maybe the last year. I've seen a lot of shifts away from ESG and sustainability language, but I think that really started a couple of years ago. It's just been accelerated over the last year. And I think it's really language is the biggest pullback I'm seeing is not necessarily an actual funding. Like my sustainability peers, some might be laid off, but they're not usually unemployed for a year or 2 years unless they want to be. Not saying that it doesn't happen. Absolutely. Some people, yes. But sustainability leaders and practitioners are so specialized in knowledge that we are still very much in demand. So you can find something to do almost always. But I'm seeing a pullback more in the language. I'm seeing walking back on climate commitments because I think people are worried about taking the risk of standing out, of not meeting those commitments, of many companies just kind of were going with the flow, going with the group when they made them. And so as a consultant, especially, I was being brought in quite often, especially over, let's say 5 years ago, 4, 3, because the CEO made a commitment publicly, had no idea what that would take, had not considered or talked to the sustainability leaders at all, and suddenly they were tasked with meeting this commitment that they like had no idea. So they would say, oh yeah, that company went net zero 2050, that's what we're doing. They'd put out a statement and now they're doing it and no one knows how. And so I think some of it is that just a correction that's happening to be more intentional about how we're doing this work. And I think maybe moving away from hopefully just the focus on the marketing and PR side, which it helps, I think, with awareness and public kind of visibility, but the impact side of sustainability. So when we talk about sustainability, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about just data transparency because that's all the regulations are right now is just disclosure? They don't talk about impact. You can have negative impact year over year increasing and you're still fine when it comes to most regulations. They just want you to disclose your activity and what's material often. And so if we're talking about what I think of sustainability is future proofing, it's preparing for the future. It's making sure that your business is around for the future, that people are around for the future. And that could be resource efficiency. That might mean, the right teaming. It could be reducing your business risk. Like I talked to a number of companies that are operating heavily dependent on Africa for raw materials, whether that's steel, rare minerals, all of these things without any African leadership on their executive team, on their board. And so now that geopolitical situation is shifting, where a lot of those countries are starting to become more truly independent, what does that mean for their business? It's a business risk to navigate it that way. Also could impact your resource management, your ability to supply your customers' demand. And it could be about burning out your teams. I'm seeing a lot of burnout with sustainability people and executives in general. I've done quite a bit of research, and I think over half in some studies, up to 70 something percent of executives are experiencing burnout and mental health issues.
Wow.
It's a problem. And so even if your business is profitable, if you're burning out your executives and your teams and people are leaving, that means you have churn, you have turnover, you're losing knowledge, business continuity. If you're depending heavily on consultants and contingent workers, same issue. There's a lot of turnover. And so it goes beyond just environmental kind of carbon waste and water. It's about communities, people, operations, structure, organizational change management. It's so many things that are kind of rolled up into that one term. That's what I've been focusing on more is, okay, we have the term sustainability, but what do I actually identify in the organization where the trapped value is? And for me, that's what I'm focused on when I talk about sustainability is like really 5 main dimensions of that and assessing those and identifying where the trap value is and then helping people to unlock that. Yeah, I think it's more language and getting clear about what are we even talking about the same thing? Are we just talking about data? Are we talking about operations? All of it, supply chain.
I love the personal sustainability angle. Dan and I earlier we were chatting about not only do you have to be building a impactful and profitable business, but it has to be sustainable for ourselves, not and the team in terms of our own health, our own wellness, our own families. What are you doing in that space to build sustainable, like individual sustainability from an execution perspective?
A lot of it comes down to not forgetting, or let's say remembering that you have a body.
Yeah.
When you come to work. I feel like so we kind of reached that point during lockdown. Ironically, it's kind of this tragic state of things. And at the same time, I feel like, especially in the corporate world, it was the first time that most people were allowed to come to work as a whole human, where we didn't have to pretend that we weren't parents. We didn't have to pretend like we didn't have dogs or my little aquatic friends back there. We didn't have to pretend like we were well when we were sick. We didn't have to pretend that we loved to travel when we didn't, or go to that event that we didn't want to. It was just we got to, I think, explore more of who we actually are as a person, as people in community. Not easy. I think a lot of people struggled, obviously, during that time, but I think it was a different way of approaching how we do business and how we relate to people in the professional world. And that's a lot of the work is first, it's that showing up and remembering you have a body and checking in, especially for founders, especially for executives. I find that there is a tendency to hustle and need to hustle. And yes, it's important. And if you are sick, you can't hustle anymore. And so, one way or another, your body will make you have balance, and it's either going to be voluntary or not. And I've known a lot of people that are now chronically ill, or one of my friends had a heart attack and passed away at the age of 42.
Wow.
Being in really stressful consulting life, trying to get to the top, and then got there and passed away before the announcement had even been made. And so a lot of it for me is regulating your nervous system, figuring out what you actually need to be successful, and not just in the metrics of your business, but you as a human. Do you need some time outside? Do you need to have water next to your desk? Do you need to talk to this person once a week or that person? Do you need time to go pick up your child, or time to walk your dog, or even just having those human connections before we jump into business, when we're at a team meeting, of what's going on for you today? What's something you like? Breathing techniques, do a lot of somatic work with people. But yeah, it's essentially just remembering that you're a human and not a machine. And it really helps. And that other people are too. So when you lead a team, you can't lead them like they're machines either, because they're not and you're not. And so we can have machine tools, but we are not that. So yeah.
It makes me think of everything that you just described there. Something that I constantly try to remind myself and remind my team is that even in B2B business, that all we are is a group of humans trying to solve another group of humans' problems, right? And like when you start to humanize it like that, yes, there's often technology involved and other aspects, but at the end of the day, it's humans trying to solve humans, and relationships. And I was telling Garrett this morning that I saw this Harvard study that's been going on for 80 plus years on a group of humans that they check in every 4 or 5 years on. And the number one factor of driving positive health and just kind of mental well-being is the quality of their relationships. And so, I mean, it comes back to whether that's your, personal, family, or intimate relationships, or the relationships that you have professionally, whether within your own company or with your suppliers, your customers, whoever it may be. I think, again, it comes back to that human aspect. So I think it's interesting that you touch on that.
I love that. It also, I think, it is something that I think is really important when we're talking about sustainability or climate change, especially in the US. It tends to become a very politicized and heated debate sometimes. I live in the South. I come from a climate change denying family. I don't know how I really got here, but I'm here. And so I had to have, when I was younger, I would try to convince my dad, especially, like, you look at all this data and information. Can't you see it? How could you not see? And so it obviously did not work. But like, I just lived my life and loved, my dad and had this relationship with him. And over the years, he saw how I did things. And one day he came to me and he said, it's like, Melanie, he was so intense. And I said, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Am I about to like go down? And he said, is this what you've been talking about for 20 years? And I was like, what? And there was this documentary on television about seeds and bioengineering and all of these things and the impact that that can have on farming. And he was distraught, like physically affected by this realization. I said, yeah, welcome to my world, Dad. That was the game changer, was just all of those things. But I think if you can see another person as human, it changes how you're able to relate. You don't have to think the same way. You don't have to believe the same thing. You don't have to have the same ideas. And I think that's usually when things are actually better, is when you can have relationship with people that are different. That's where innovation happens. That's where change happens. That's where growth, and like, that's how evolution happens, is you have some things that are different that, like, oh, okay, I'll take a little of that and a little of that, and we grew this thing. But I think it's really about seeing yourself as human and relating to other people as human. Yeah.
Yeah. I got two questions on my mind, Melanie. One is, at the beginning of the conversation, you said some of those early years really helped shape how you think about your impact on the world. We just crossed over Earth Overshoot Day, where we've consumed more of our resources than we've produced, and we're only just over halfway through the year, which is pretty shocking. How are you as an individual, through your learnings, helping to minimize your impact? And then in this crazy dynamic environment that we're in, what's got you most excited about the trajectory we're on from a sustainability perspective?
It's interesting because working in this work, I feel like there's the irony of sustainability people usually not actually getting outside. We're usually tied to a computer or a phone or traveling in an airport or hotel. The irony, right? So I think that's one thing for me, is just really having the balance of, yes, working hard. I have worked so many hours for so long, yes, but making sure that I do take time. I start every day out with meditation and some breath work, some movement, no matter what, even if it's a minute or 5 minutes, I just have to. And so that's like my personal kind of internal sustainability, is making sure that I am checking in with myself, minimizing like news alerts and social media alerts and time, prioritizing getting outside as much as I can when I can, spending time with my family, being a good parent. That's a really big one for me because my son's 7. And yes, there are so many things I want to do, but I think part of my responsibility is making sure that I'm growing a human that can be responsible and make good choices. And like, that's super important. It's like, if I'm talking about the future, like he's the future, and he's going to be, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to be here. And so I have to make sure that he's equipped to be as good as he can. I have like a little garden and stuff like that. And I do things like go to the farmer's market and, those kinds of little things, but I'm not perfect. I'm not vegan. I'm not vegetarian. I try to live a balanced diet in life that works for me. And organic food and stuff like that, sure. But just trying to have balance, I think, is the personal thing. And then I'm really excited about just what's next. What are we going to do now? Because I had this realization. I was at this hotel for a work conference, an internal kind of meeting conference last fall, which is a lot of the shift that got me here where I am now. And I was looking down, talking to this producer for a TEDx talk, and I just looking down there like, what are we doing this for? Why are we here? What am I working for? I've been doing this work for so long, but what are we actually doing? okay, we have these goals like net zero by 2030 or net zero by 2050, but until that moment, so we're talking less than a year ago, and I've been in this for 25 plus years, never once had considered what happens if we succeed.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? Like when I wake up in the morning in that 2050 world, if we've reached net zero, whatever goal we have, what does that look like? When I wake up, what do I see out of my window? Do I have a window? What does the building look like that I'm sleeping in? What am I sleeping on? What kind of clothes am I wearing? Where's my family? What does my community look like? What like am I seeing like what sounds are different? We might see a resurgence of certain species or more quiet because of less combustion engines or more people outside, more music and creativity. So just, yeah, what are we actually wanting to build?
I think that's a perfect transition into the way that we love to close out these conversations, which is getting a better understanding of whether it's personally or professionally. If you were to finish this statement, what would it look like? In my life, I will have been successful when?
In my life, I will have been successful when my job isn't needed anymore. When I have made my role completely obsolete. I think that is success because it shouldn't be needed. If it, sustainability is actually embedded into the way that you do things, you don't need somebody telling you to do it or managing that. It's a responsibility of everyone across an organization or a community or a family, or it's like all of us working together to make sure we still have somewhere to live. Like in the next generation, but just making sure that we are caring for things and each other and resources and also like profitability, if that's going to still be the economic model that we have, that would also be integrating sustainability then a little bit more directly. So yeah, I think me being obsolete will be my success.
It's funny you say the word profitability, because as you were describing that, I was thinking basically having sustainability as ubiquitous within a business setting as profitability.
Mm-hmm. Agree. You can look at climate goals. I think that too. If you had a profitability goal or business goal, financial target, and you were not on track to reach that target with zero plan of reaching that target, there would be issue.
Yeah.
There would be conversations. There would be changes. We don't treat sustainability like that. And I think that is going to change, of people making realistic targets, being accountable for reaching them and making progress on them. And actually, yeah, just making sure that you're having true impact. But profitability, I think, should integrate these concepts because it makes sense overall.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Melanie, thank you for your time. This has been a tremendous conversation.
Appreciate the holistic view. So good.
It's great. It was really great to talk to both of you. I've enjoyed this a lot.
Love it. Thank you.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.